quickly this morning. I'm sure there's still a lot of people asleep. The internet bandwidth is very high, it seems like. As soon as we jumped on, we went automatically live, which is good news. But good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is August 4th, 2024, coming at you for a 7:30 in the morning update. Debby has evolved overnight. We took full advantage of the diurnal maximum that we had talked about last couple of live streams, and you could see a night and day difference, albeit is still a little asymmetrical. Doesn't look the best that it could in the immediate short term, but over the last 12 hours, we've seen a huge blossoming of thunderstorm activity, especially on its east, north, and south side. Unfortunately, the west side is experiencing just a little bit of dry air and some wind shear out of the west. You can kind of see the convection off towards the west side here. It'll blow up, and you can see those upper clouds getting kind of pushed up towards the east-northeast because we have west-southwesterly winds coming across it as a response to the trough and our cold frontal boundary that's coming down out of the United States. That's going to help to lift this thing up towards the north and eventually towards the northeast before steering potentially loses its hold on it and it slows down over the northern Florida peninsula into Georgia in the southeast, portions of South Carolina, before hopefully finally ejecting up the eastern seaboard. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for tuning in today. It is going to be a bright and early update. This may be one of our last updates on Debby from here in the Weather Center. I'm very heavily in a heated debate right now as to whether or not I simply head west towards Tampa Bay, Clearwater, and intercept the potential funnel cloud waterspout threat and tropical storm conditions that are expected to move into that area over the next 3 to 6 hours, or if I want to go full send and just kind of traverse the coastline all the way up to the Big Bend starting earlier this afternoon, camp out overnight for the morning landfall that a lot of the major model sources and weather sources are predicting up there somewhere in the Big Bend area. We shall see. I need to very rapidly iron out the plan and figure out what it is that I'm going to be doing. But all in all, this storm is looking a lot healthier than it did to the south of Cuba upon its exit from Cuba. And we have lots of really good thunderstorm and deep convection flaring up. You can see all the hot towers right in through here, just blowing up to the immediate east side and trying to wrap around the center. The center itself, I'll use yellow, is somewhere right in through here, so it is still a very lopsided system, and I will add, it does seem like it's a little bit closer to the coastline than what the projected path from National Hurricane Center and what our track guidance had indicated as well. If you look, it's very difficult to see, but we do have northerly winds and southerly movement in our cloud cover here, wraps back around along the southern base of the system, and then you can see our cloud cover obviously coming up out of the south across the Florida Peninsula, so our center does seem like it is a little bit closer to the southwest corner of Florida. It looks like Bradenton is going to be starting to see the effects of thunderstorms very soon. Fort Myers, Sarasota, Charlotte Harbor, Punta Gorda is also starting to feel a little bit of this residual feeder banding effect, now more confined to the storm itself as opposed to elongated and wrapped around, flowing around like we saw yesterday. I'll switch you over to the True Color Visible Satellite. We don't have it fully with us just yet. The sun is still coming up, obviously. As we all know, it is only 7:34 in the morning, so we're barely getting a little bit of a glimpse of what it looks like to the naked eye on our satellite imagery here. But you can see, if you were to streamline where the center is, it is somewhere right in through, if I can have my pen back, somewhere right in through here. So it does seem like it is a bit closer to our west coast, and I'm beginning to wonder personally if this will have implications or a subtle eastward jog in the landfall potential, unless this thing finally jogs back towards the north-northwest as opposed to due north like it is heading at this point in time. Most of our hurricane models and our global model guidance indicate that it could come ashore closer to Apalachicola Bay as opposed to the Perry, Florida, Tallahassee area, but regardless, if you reside in Tallahassee or any areas in the immediate vicinity of Tallahassee, you want to hunker down and stay in place and shelter in place as much as you can later on tonight and especially tomorrow morning, because you will likely be taking a direct hit from, at that point in time, Hurricane Debby. If it does come ashore to your immediate west and you reside in Tallahassee or any outerlying areas in the immediate vicinity, 20-25 nautical miles around Tallahassee, you're going to be getting the dirty side and the worst side of the system. If it does come ashore due south of your location, obviously hopefully you will be getting the center of circulation. So regardless, you're going to be realizing actual hurricane force conditions as this feature comes ashore. We move over to our latest guidance from National Hurricane Center. This is our 5 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time analysis and forecast track. Looking at the center being somewhere up there over the Big Bend of Florida between anywhere around 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. And if you look, this system is going to move very, very, very slowly. So the flood risk for almost the entirety of the southeast United States is going to be immense, particularly for South Carolina, the eastern and southeastern half of Georgia, much of northern and central Florida, as well as the central and eastern extents of the Panhandle. Pensacola, getting closer to the Florida-Alabama border down in this general area, not nearly as much of a threat, especially since this is a very east side loaded system. This is the wind graphic here, but as you saw in the satellite image, if you extrapolate it forward, a lot of that energy in terms of thunderstorm, heavy rainfall activity is going to be off towards the east, north, and south quadrants of this system as well. So if you're further off towards the west in the Panhandle, away from where the center and the east side of this system is, you're going to see residual impacts. So for my friends out there watching from northern Georgia, most of Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, and further towards the west, you're going to see pretty much nil to none with this system unless it can really expedite its efforts in wrapping around the center and getting itself a lot more symmetrical than where we stand right now. That will also prevent any sort of intense, rapid intensification. As you can see here, according to the 5 a.m. advisory, we've only gone up about 10 miles an hour since we first plopped off of Cuba as a 30-35 mile an hour tropical depression. Very quickly acquired tropical storm characteristics, took on named storm status earlier yesterday, and now we're slowly trying to build that momentum. Chrissy, you're very welcome. CWTDF, hey, Naz, question, if you don't mind answering. If not, I understand, no worries. My question is, what's with Brevard County looking at today? So Brevard County, I've been having a lot of folks asking about east and southeast Florida. You guys are not necessarily in the clear, but you're not going to see as hellacious of effects as the west side of Florida, interior west central Florida, and the Big Bend area, for sure. So on the East Coast, remember what we've been briefing for the last couple of days, we have all this wraparound flow on the east and southeast side of the storm. So you're going to have onshore flow all throughout the day today. Surf conditions are going to be very rough. We'll likely have pressure gradient induced winds, or winds simply created by the gradient around the lowering pressure center of Debby. As we all know, tropical cyclones are just very strong, warm core, low pressure systems, very similar to what we have in terms of our mid-latitude cyclones that give us our winter storms, just different internal dynamics, but the pressure gradient and the dynamics around it behave very much so the same. So east coast of Florida, rip current threat, high surf threat is going to be an issue today. Any of those feeder bands that do try to get their act together coming on shore, modifying over the Gulf Stream, could produce very heavy rainfall, gusty winds up to tropical storm force, as well as a very, very, very isolated tornado risk. I'll quickly skim on over to our composite reflectivity. You can see here, the reason I say a very isolated risk for tornadoes is we've actually thankfully seen a lot of our initial banding that was coming on the East Coast down towards Miami, West Palm, Palm Beach, Boca Raton, Fort Lauderdale. We had a lot more of that banding going on yesterday. There was a lot more of it coming through. We had a tornado warning at one point down near the Miami, greater Miami area, severe thunderstorm warnings in effect with these bands coming ashore. You can see on the composite reflectivity this morning, that has since dissipated. We don't have as much going on. Now, granted, with daytime heating and all this moisture coming around, there's probably going to be pop-up thunderstorms as the sun gets higher in the sky. We have fairly clear skies out there right now. I've been loading up the Weather Center mobile for whatever it is we're going to be doing today. And the sun is out, so we probably will have a combination of Debby with some daytime development in our thunderstorms for the central and eastern half of the state. So regardless if it's clean, crystal clear out there for you on the East Coast from, we'll say, Palm Bay, up towards the northeast, Jacksonville, down through Daytona, the Melbourne, Cocoa Beach area, the Space Coast, all the way down to Miami. If you're looking at clear skies right now, it will probably cloud over a little bit more as this system works its way towards the north. You can see as well, I'll go ahead and zoom this in so you guys can see as well. We don't need the full southeast right now. We'll come on down like this. It's a little easier for you all to see. There's our center right there. So no real pronounced core just yet. In fact, it does look like it is starting to drift a bit more towards the west-northwest. At the last second there, at the start of the loop here, we're moving at about maybe a 280, 290 degree direction in this sort of fashion. So there is bit of westward kinking in the center here, but look at these extra bands that are getting ready to develop and move onshore. This is what's going to help to increase our west coast flood risk. We're probably going to get some very heavy rainfall and higher wind activity in Tampa, St. Petersburg, Brandon, Bradenton, Clearwater, and further up the west coast of Florida as this continues to traverse northward. And this system is only moving at about 10 to 13 miles an hour. So as a result, these storms, as they train up out of the south and graze the coast, our flood risk is going to continue to go up and up and up and up and up until this thing is on land. And even then, all that's going to happen is our flood risk is going to move from there to here, where I have everything highlighted in yellow, and maybe even further towards the south, Tampa and St. Petersburg, the Tampa Bay area, those major metropolitan areas in West Coast Florida, Hillsborough County as well, is probably going to realize flash flood conditions for a good majority of the day. If you extrapolate this system forward, we'll take the center from there and move it up to just before landfall. Look at all the rainfall that's on the east side of it. All that rainfall is still going to be in place along the west coast of Florida, moving up towards the north, and it will be getting pulled up out of the eastern Gulf of Mexico. So those rainfall, that heavy rain, high wind, surge threat is going to be present for a large majority of today and into tomorrow. Ashes, it is moving slower. Is St. Augustine Beach going to get pummeled? I don't know if it's going to get pummeled, to tell you the truth. And honestly, I'm not going to lie. I always forget where St. Augustine is. I don't know why. I've visited St. Augustine a number of times, and I keep on getting that area confused. That's what I thought. Okay, St. Augustine is up towards the northeast side of Florida. No, I would not say you guys are going to be pummeled. I don't really think so. The biggest threat is going to be the heavy rainfall as this system more or less migrates from landfall somewhere in this area up towards the east-northeast like so. All that rainfall is going to be pulled eastward and northeastward across the peninsula, and that's when your flood risk is going to go up through the roof for Jacksonville, St. Augustine, Palm Bay, Daytona, Ocala, other interior locations, Gainesville, Cedar Key, other outer-lying areas of the northern one-third of the Florida Peninsula. I don't know why I keep getting St. Augustine confused with out west in the Panhandle. I don't know what area kind of throws me off geographically. Speaking of flash flooding, this is the graphic I wanted to pull up for you guys. It's not that I don't want to answer location by location questions. It's not that I don't want to answer, will this location get it? Will this zip code get it? Will this city get it? That's not what I'm doing. I don't want to be lazy about it. I just want to generalize the flood threat just in case you can kind of put yourself on the map figuratively and understand, okay, if I live here, looking at the graphic that's pulled up on screen right now, the risk for flash flooding is X. So for example, East Coast Florida, Brevard, Volusia County, further down the eastern seaboard of the peninsula of Florida, we're at a marginal risk for flooding. Very low-end threat because it's such an east side loaded system, and it is well off to your west, at least 200 to 300 miles west of the east coast of Florida, if not even just a little beyond that. We're expecting landfall somewhere around Tallahassee, if not just to the east of Tallahassee, right in this general area, moving up towards the east-northeast before bending back a bit more towards the northeast. And as a result, you can kind of use your imagination and put yourself anywhere on the map. I'd be somewhere right in through here. That little black dot that I added there, that would be my home center there, my home base here in Polk County. I can see I'm at a slight 15% risk for flash flooding as this system goes up. This is valid through Friday, August 9th, so don't get it twisted as well. This is not just for the day today. This is not for today and tomorrow. This is through pretty much the life cycle of this system as it moves very, very slowly. It'll be here first thing Monday morning. It'll be here Tuesday morning. It'll be up here Wednesday morning. It'll be somewhere up in here Thursday morning. So Debbie is going to be hanging out with us pretty much throughout the week, and it has the potential to go even into this weekend before we are finally done with Tropical Storm / Hurricane Debbie, before everything is all said and done completely. and we can close up shop, if you will. So, especially in South Carolina, and I want to admit this is probably going to expand more into North Carolina, depending on where this system tracks. I'm in full agreement with the southeast and the southern half of Georgia, the eastern side of South Carolina, and much of northern central Florida, and the Panhandle being under a risk of a moderate, if not a high risk, of flash flooding. I would honestly argue that this purple area here, I'll draw it in for you guys, I would honestly argue this purple area here should be extended down just a little bit more as well, because we're thinking as it moves ashore, it's going to slow way down as it crosses between Florida and Georgia, moving up towards the northeast at about, we'll say 30 to 40 degrees, maybe 45, 50 degrees towards the northeast like so. It is going to be crawling. So all of that energy is just going to dump and dump and dump and dump, a multi-day potential flood risk, as well as onshore flow producing that surge / high wave coastal flooding threat. And remember, guys, with it being a low pressure system moving up like so based on the current trajectory, as it does so, we're going to still have the good wind component coming around the east side and the southeast side of it, pushing water up against the coastline. So coastal flooding is going to be an issue, coastal inundation, which basically means areas are being submerged underneath water, will be an issue. And it's going to be an extended event. Thankfully, it's not going to be like Ian. It's not going to be like Francis or Gene of 2004, to where this is a major hurricane moving through and just dumping feet or foot after foot of rainfall. But if you take the rainfall that it is building up now and you give it an extra 24-ish hours, obviously we're going to see an increase in our overall shower, rainfall, and storm coverage, alongside whatever preliminary weather activity we get over the state of Florida through just basic daytime heating. If we get a little bit of an East Coast sea breeze to set up despite this change in our overall environmental pattern, we could see a little bit of extra, I'll say dusting, a little extra sprinkling or spritzing of rainfall before the actual main event starts to kick off for West Florida, Central Florida, and then the northern half of Florida from this general area on up towards the northeast. I just got word in the chat that National Hurricane Center has finally gotten on the ball, and there it is. Perfect. Okay, so we finally have this out there as well. Look at that. So up and comings even on the live stream. This might honestly cause me to cut my storm chasing short so we can start to investigate this area of interest down here. So forgive me for derailing part of the live stream. I wanted to get into the model data very quickly and look at the expected impacts as we go over the next 12 to 18 hours. But here we go. We have another disturbance out there on the game board, and I'm very thankful they finally put this on. I honestly think we could have had a yellow X back when it was somewhere in the central MDR back here, looking as healthy as it is. But thankfully, we still have it out. It's on the board for a 10 and 20 split, 10% chance of development over the next 48 hours, 20% chance over the next 7 days. Models are back and forth on this. The Euro does develop it, albeit fairly late. The GFS does develop it, maybe a little bit later than what the live data shows right now. The Canadian model develops it, as well as the Icon. So we actually have very good model agreement for this, and I'm watching very carefully something back behind it. So as this yellow X propagates westward through the Windward Islands into the central and western Caribbean, I'm already forecasting, especially if National Hurricane Center stays on the ball after Debby can move up the coast, we're going to get another AOY out there near the Cabo Verde Islands, moving kind of in this general direction. I would imagine there's going to be a third AOY on the board after Debby makes landfall and moves in. This can move into the Caribbean. We're going to get another one. I'll show you guys that at the end of the briefing, but Windward Islands, Lesser Antilles to the entirety, or the entirety of the island chain. I'm having an aneurysm. The entirety of the Lesser Antilles will need to be on watch for this. It does not seem like it's going to move much towards the north. If it does make a bit of a latitudinal change, it'll probably be closer to the likes of Haiti, Jamaica, and the Cayman Islands if it decides to start to lift up towards the Yucatan Channel. That's if. If this feature can organize earlier on in its life cycle, if it does, then we'll start to see it gain a little bit more latitude, as some of our earlier model runs from the GFS and the European model had indicated. We could see it slip up towards the north and become an issue for Louisiana, Texas, and the northern coastline of Mexico, very similar to what Beryl did about a month ago. We'll get back to that here in a second. I also wanted to show you the current steering. So this is our morning analysis. In fact, we're getting close to 12 Zulu, so I'll show you the 12Z mock chart here. This is what's going to be steering Debby. We have this stationary boundary right across the eastern seaboard, cutting through the northeast, the mid-Atlantic, Virginia, West Virginia, North, South Carolina, and that's what provided some severe weather activity for the East Coast and the Southeast United States yesterday. If you guys tuned in for my afternoon live stream, I showed you a lot of thunderstorm activity popping off through parts of the Gulf Coast states into the mid-Atlantic, the Carolinas, and so on. That's what's going to be pinching off our path of least resistance. I'll use the color blue here to show you guys where our high pressure is out there over Bermuda, over the western Atlantic. And in the black shading here, this is where Debby is going to try to go, right up in between there, somewhere like so. That is her forward path of least resistance. You can see high pressure building in from the northwest, moving southeast. We obviously have our high pressure over the greater Atlantic basin that's pushing towards the west ever so slightly, squeezing off a very small corridor of lower pressure for this storm to escape through. What is anticipated to happen is this frontal boundary is going to continue to sink through the Great Lakes, the Midwest, down into the interior portions of eastern CONUS, or the eastern United States, and as a result, this boundary here and its upper-level trough and jet stream high up in the atmosphere is going to steal the thickness, the gradient, the temperature gradient, I should say, from this stationary boundary here, and it's going to shut it down. That's why we're going to lose this component of our steering pattern, and we're going to be left with just a very large area of anomalous high pressure in place right over top and right where we need to, I guess you can say, entrain or entrench Debby, and that's what's going to have her moving very, very slowly. We want features like cold fronts and high pressures to create larger corridors or even narrow corridors for these systems to move. If you think about it like a fire hose or just a regular old garden hose, if you turn the spigot on, you have the water flowing out of the end. That would be your path of least resistance. You have your opening in the nozzle, so the water's flowing out. You can wash your car, wet your lawn, water the garden plants, etc. If you put your thumb over the edge of the hose, obviously you know what happens. The velocity of the water coming out of the hose speeds up. Same principle here. If we have high pressure building in from the northwest, high pressure building in from the southeast, it's going to create a really rapid acceleration between the two pressure centers, and that would actually help to pick up the speed of Debby. Problem is, we're just going to have high pressure blending together with high pressure, and as we know, towards the center of high pressure, you have very calm conditions, very little wind flow, very little anything in high pressure and ridging. So as a result, that's why she's going to be moving so slow as we move through the southeast and the mid-Atlantic United States, really ramping up our flood risk. Here's a look at our 24-hour rainfall totals. You can see where Debby is crystal clear on this model. This is our 24-hour total accumulation. We're starting off with 24 hours because I want to show you how intense the rainfall is going to be within just a day. This system is going to be with us for multiple days, from today all the way through to possibly Friday. That's about 5.5, almost 6 days of Debby for everybody. And she's going to be spreading the weather wealth, if you will, for a lot of folks out there. So you can see as it comes ashore within 24 hours, we're already looking at rainfall accumulations potentially exceeding 5, 6, 7, 8 inches for much of the northern half of Florida, the eastern half of the Panhandle, from about the Gainesville area through to Tyndall Air Force Base, Panama City. I'm looking right in through this area when I mentioned the eastern half of the Panhandle. This is the northern side of the Florida Peninsula. All this area could see anywhere between 4 to 8 inches in just the first day we hang out with this system. You go to 48 hours and you can see in 24 hours that heavy rainfall threat extends up into the eastern half, the southern half of Georgia, getting into South Carolina, where our rainfall rates for a full 24-hour period, only 24 hours, are still at around 5 to 6, maybe even 7 inches in some areas. But then if you look down towards the south, as you move into Tuesday, we're still seeing rain rates anywhere between 1 to 3 inches for Florida. You go even beyond that to the 72-hour point, and you can see that areas that were already hit by Debby are still seeing daily accumulations between 3/4 of an inch to an inch. Obviously, that doesn't sound like much. It doesn't look like much on this 24-hour chart, but remember, this is only day-by-day increments. When I switch over to the total precip for the period, it'll be vastly different. It'll be a lot more intense looking, immense looking. With that being said, we'll go over to our total precip. This is for day 1. This is 24 hours from now. You can already see that much of central northern Florida is getting up towards that 5 to 7 inch rainfall. You go to 48 hours, it continues to go downhill from there. Flash flooding risk is going to be fairly extensive, fairly elevated for many. And you go to 72 hours and forget it. We're already looking at over a foot of rainfall right about where the center is expected to track. Very close proximity to where the low center of circulation is expected to be. We're looking at landfall somewhere through here, and it is going to travel up and up and up like so, moving very slowly. If you look at the timestamp, this is Wednesday. Today is Sunday, and we're looking 4 days into the future, and it really has not moved very far. So our rainfall totals are going to be extensive for a large corridor, and that's why, going back to this graphic here, I honestly want to say that this purple should be extended all the way through, in my opinion. I would honestly just cover down with as slow of a feature this is. Even if it were a tropical depression or a tropical disturbance with this much rainfall with it, we're still going to see flooding. It doesn't take a hurricane. It doesn't need to be a major hurricane to produce very heavy rainfall. Just any storm system moving this slow will produce large amounts of rain. To put it into perspective for my Floridians out there who have experienced our daytime sea breeze storms, we've been through it. We've seen how just a regular daytime thunderstorm that stops over your local area for an hour or two can produce 2 to 4 inches of rainfall in just an hour or two. You put a whole area of tropical rainfall over your area for 24, 48 hours, and you're going to see exponential increases in those rainfall totals piling up on one another. So as you go all the way through to the end, by the time, even then, Debby is still not out of the picture. This is now into Saturday, and Debby is still not out of the big picture. You can see some of these rainfall totals, 21 inches, 19 inches, 11 inches, 12 inches, 11 inches all the way up into North Carolina. North Carolina looking at anywhere between 3 to 5 inches of rainfall. Down here in Florida, going above a foot of rain over the Big Bend area. And even into Central Florida and West Florida, we're looking at anywhere between 8 to 10 inches of rainfall on the immediate west coastline, getting in towards the Orlando metro area, the Four Corners area, between 3 to 5 inches of rainfall. Flooding is going to be the number one risk with this system, hands down. So here's a look at the 0Z European model. The 0Z is finally catching up, still initializing fairly weak. We are sitting at around anywhere between 1,000 to 995 millibars. I'm getting word in the chat that we just had another update on Debby, the 8 o'clock advisory. And so we are strengthening. We're definitely strengthening, and I want to look at the actual public advisory to see where the center of circulation is. So the central pressure is still at 1,001 millibars, but the European model is initializing much weaker than that. Unfortunately, the Euro just naturally has a tendency to do that. I don't know why, but regardless, 60-mile-an-hour tropical storm. We are now mid to high-end tropical storm. We only have about 14 miles an hour before hurricane status. We're already probably seeing gusts upwards of Category 1 intensity off our west coast. And you can see here, Debby is expected to strengthen rapidly before landfall in the Florida Big Bend region. So things are just only going to continue to go downhill as we go throughout the day today. But let's take a look at the track tendency brought to us by the European model. It's still initializing fairly weak. If you look, the model wants to bring in it as a 997, 996 millibar tropical storm. It has it deepening down to where we sit now by tonight at 8 p.m. So the European model is behind. I wouldn't trust the intensity on this. It's obviously lagging back. It's underestimating. It's under forecasting. So if you want to get an idea of what the strength of this feature will be as it moves in, don't look at the Euro. It's obviously doing poorly. The Euro in 24 hours has this thing down to a central pressure that is currently observed 12 hours prior. This is valid for 8 p.m., 1,000 millibar low. We're already there, and it's 12 hours early. So as this comes ashore, it will be strengthening. You can see the European model is anticipating it will continue to deepen down, looking at a landfall right around 8 o'clock in the morning as it moves inland, and then it slows way down. It still moves up slowly through North Carolina. This is Friday now, and you can see that it is still in the picture, and we're still going to be seeing that onshore flow out of the south and southwest for Florida, Georgia, and South Carolina. So the rainfall swath is still going to be pulled up around the backside of this vortex, being funneled in as well by our high pressure off in the Atlantic. We're going to have a really nice area of good low to mid-level convergence, keeping the rainfall threat in place even into next weekend. even into next weekend. You come over to the GFS looks a little more ominous. The GFS is actually initializing a little bit better than the Euro. At the start of the 6Z model run, you can see right here, 1,003 millibars. So even the GFS starts off just a smidge, just a little nudge weaker than what we want to see based on current observations, but very rapidly adjusts for this, moves up towards the north, deepening down to approaching Category 2 level intensity, a 980 millibar central pressure as it moves ashore somewhere just to the immediate south of Tallahassee. So that's why I emphasize to you guys in the Big Bend, regardless of where you are in the Big Bend of Florida, from Steinhatchee through to Apalachicola, you need to be preparing for hurricane conditions through the night tonight and early tomorrow morning. As the sun comes up, there will be a Category 1 hurricane, possible Category 2, sitting right overhead at 12Z Monday morning, 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. Right up here where my cursor is spinning around, I'll even draw it in for you guys so you can see right there. 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time is when we're thinking landfall, which is also what has me a little confused about the forecast track by National Hurricane Center. The Hurricane Center seems to have it coming in much later than that. The current projected path, let me go to the interactive one so we can zoom in together and take a close look at it. It looks like Hurricane Center's website is bogged down due to all the traffic on it. That's why it's lagging. There we go. Let's take a look at the interactive map so we can see exactly what's going on out there. We can zoom in and kind of take advantage of this map here. So there's the center just to the immediate east of Tallahassee, and this is forecast at 2 p.m. I think this is a little late unless the Hurricane Center is thinking this thing is going to slow down even more. That would not be good. I would honestly think that this intensity forecast could be a little bit undersold. I really do think that this could be a little bit stronger if we are expecting it to slow down and still take an extra over 24 hours to get inland. Because right now it is 8 a.m. Sunday. 8 a.m. Monday would be 24 hours from now. If we're looking at a landfall between the lunch hour of noon to 2 p.m., according to National Hurricane Center, that means this feature has about another 30 hours over water. So we could see a period of quick intensification before it comes ashore. So a realistic ceiling could definitely be a low-end Category 2 hurricane on approach for that area. Let's continue on, though. You can see the GFS brings it ashore, keeps it fairly strong, and then kind of parks it over the southeast, and it doesn't really go anywhere. This is already Thursday, getting into Thursday, and then from there, you can go ahead and throw it out. The models are definitely being very bizarre. They're going to keep going in all sorts of different directions, so beyond Wednesday, I would say don't pay too much attention to the model data. We're going to have a huge change in our overall environmental steering conditions, and as a result, the models are going to panic. They're more or less going to go into in an alarm state, if you will, and kind of like when you hurt yourself or when you burn your hand on a hot stove. You're sitting there, you put your hand on the stove and you flip out. You're like, whoa, that hurt. Kind of what the models are going to do here, because they're going to go from a very precise steering pattern in the large scale to almost nothing. So the models are going to have like a moment and they're not going to know what to do. So that's why you're seeing the GFS going woo, 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 and bringing it back towards the west, bringing it back towards the east, and just flying all over the place. You don't want to use them too heavily and not try to track it beyond Wednesday. We got to get a little closer in time, because you can see the GFS is thinking this thing's going to come back offshore and make another landfall, and I really don't believe that's going to happen. That's very far-fetched, but that's just one random model solution that the GFS has for us because of the fact that we have all this extra rainfall, all this extra shower activity, not only brought in by that next upcoming frontal system, but also the high pressure out there in the greater Atlantic. Here's a look at our H-Wharf. This is the H-Wharf for this morning, 6 Zulu. You can see that we are expecting a Category 2 potential landfall as this system moves in between 5 and 8 a.m. tomorrow morning. This is 8 a.m. in the morning, 983 millibar hurricane as it approaches Tallahassee. Conditions go way downhill for that local area. Same thing on the halves A and B. Pretty good general thinking. On average, we are very, very convergent upon one another. Category 1 approaching Category 2. Category 2 conditions will likely be realized in the center of circulation with occasional gusts above 90 to 100 miles an hour, especially if we're looking at an 85, 90 mile an hour sustained hurricane and the strongest winds and the strongest core thunderstorms closest to the center. If we get a bit of an actual eye feature or an eye wall trying to develop, that is when the winds are going to go up and you're going to be well within Category 2 threshold. This is 5 a.m. moving into Apalachicola Bay. today, 8 a.m., barely squeaking its way onshore. So that's another problem here for our coastal areas in the Big Bend, is this could potentially be slowing down as it's making landfall. So we could have an extended period of tropical storm to hurricane conditions. Same thing with the HAFS B. Coming in, this is 5 a.m., this is 8 a.m. Notice in 3 hours, it doesn't go very far. 3 hours, 6 hours, 9 hours, 12 hours. We're still sitting pretty much inside city limits for Tallahassee. So you guys up there need to be sheltered in place. You need to have your sandbags, your water protection, your flood protection in place. Make sure you know exactly what areas of your local neighborhood, local residency are prone to urban flooding, roadway flooding. Do not go outside. You should definitely not be outside commuting. You should not be going to work on Monday. I'm even thinking of not going to work because it's like, well, we're in a natural disaster. Why are we still worried about the work day? Don't be running errands. Don't go going outside. Don't go celebrating in a hurricane party, because this is going to be a very immense threat. And all of our models are thinking it's going to take its sweet time getting through that area. Look at that. I'm literally just spamming the left cursor here, the left key mouse button, and it's not going anywhere. It's still there. This is now Wednesday evening going into Thursday morning, and it is still there until it finally washes out according to the HAFS B model. I'm pretty certain if we rewind the clock and go over to our HMON, the HMON is probably in line with the same general thinking. Yep. Same general thinking, 981 millibar low, 983 on approach at 8 a.m. on Monday morning. As the sun comes up, it is making landfall, and it doesn't really move. In fact, this is just a bit more progressive than our HAFS A and B models, but then it stops over South Georgia. This is as you go through the day on Tuesday, and it is still in Georgia as you go into the day on Wednesday. So it's going to be sticking around for a while. I'll go ahead and zoom out. Let me see if we have all of our model data in so we can look at, we'll say, the HAFS A parent. We'll just go ahead and use this. Total precip accumulation. You can see even the HAFS models are thinking that we're going to get a lot of rainfall all at once. The color shading here, the color coding does not look very impressive, but the legend key here on the right-hand side tells you that this is handled differently than our global models will produce our total precip accumulation. Global models typically have the yellow shading, the orange and tan shadings at about the 3 to 5 inch threshold. These colors here and here are actually well above a foot of rainfall, just to put it into perspective. So across central Florida into northern Florida, the top 1/3, if not the first northern half of the peninsula of Florida could see anywhere between 4 to 8 inches of rainfall. Closer to the center, you go into that 6 to 12 inches of rainfall. Lots of heavy rainfall, heavy rainfall, heavy rainfall, heavy rainfall. I'll go over to our weather models domain here really quick. We'll go to the HRRR because I also want to show you the tornado risk. The tornado risk is going to persist throughout the day today and into much of tomorrow. Here's our significant tornado parameter. You can see already as these feeder bands are working their way in, tornadoes and funnel clouds as well as water spouts off the immediate coastline are going to be a threat. This is valid for 6 a.m. Here's 8 a.m. So Tampa Bay, Clearwater, St. Petersburg, all those areas along the immediate west coast are going to have to watch for that occasional pop-off funnel, if not tornado risk, with a bit of an increase in our tornado parameters as we go throughout the day, probably by daytime heating for interior Central Florida. So if you're in Central Florida, you're not on the west coast, if you're not on a west coast coastal county and you live in Central Florida, I'll say it one more time. If you do not live close to the Gulf of Mexico coastline, if you're in Central Florida, your greatest risk over the next 48 hours will be very heavy rainfall, strong feeder banding, potential for flash flooding, and tornadoes. Funnel clouds, very quick spin-ups, pulse-like tornadoes that won't stay on the ground for too long. They are traditionally fairly weak in nature. Those are going to be your biggest risks. If you are on the west coast, obviously take those threats, add in a little bit of tropical storm level winds, and then multiply it by 2, we'll say, because you're closer to the turbulent side of the east side of the storm, the dirty side, as everybody likes to say. The closer you are to the center, you just want to do some very simple hypothetical, or I should should say weather math, and take the threats and multiply them. If you live on the East Coast, divide. If you're on the East Coast, maybe some heavy rainfall, some occasional strong bands, very, very low-end tornado risk. You multiply that by 2 if you're in Central Florida. Bit of a more elevated tornado risk, more of an elevated convective risk, more elevated thunderstorm and flood risk. And then if you're off to the West Coast, multiply it by 2. Once again, greater tornado risk, greater surge risk, greater flooding risk, and so on and so forth until you get to the center. Then you can multiply it by 4 because you're in the center of a hurricane. Does that make sense to you guys? This way it doesn't get confusing. You don't want to get too wrapped up in the maps, in the little individual colors. Oh, well, it's blank here, so nothing's happening, but then there's tornado risk here. No. That's just the model trying to do its best to give us as high resolution of a look at tornadic parameters. So all in all, regardless, on the East Coast, you're looking at mainly onshore flow, low-end flood risk, low-end tornado risk, and you'll probably just have a very gusty day thanks to that onshore gradient wind flow coming in out of the east-southeast and moving across the state. For Central Florida here, we're going to have a greater chance at seeing some flare-up daytime thunderstorms with that embedded tornadic risk, some embedded potential flash flooding, and the occasional feeder band that may try to produce very, very intermittent tropical storm-like conditions. And then I'll change the color one more time, go over to the red ink. On the immediate West Coast, obviously, you're going to have more sustained conditions. Intermittent or acute, like we would hear in the medical industry, acute versus chronic pain. You're looking at acute weather conditions on the east and central portions of the peninsula. You're looking at more chronic conditions on the west coast of Florida because you're closer to this system as it continues to intensify. So as you go through the day, if it's right off your shoreline right now, it's off the southwest corner of Florida, obviously we have a strengthening tropical storm. The wind field is not going to be as big. The rainfall is not going to be as heavy, but as it goes up and up and up, moving north, obviously it's going to be strengthening. The wind field will be expanding. The thunderstorms will be building, so you're going to see conditions going even further downhill as this marches off towards its landfall position. And then obviously up here in northern Florida from Apalachicola, Tyndall, Panama City, off towards Gainesville, Ocala, Tallahassee especially, all through here is where the worst of it is going to be, ground zero. Ground zero. Liz, Polk is definitely Central Florida. Polk County is right here. We are in as central of Central Florida as we possibly could be alongside Osceola County, Polk, or I should say Sumter County, and Orange County. This is like the heart of Florida. We're literally dead center. That's why it's called the Four Corners area. So that is definitely Central Florida. If you were on a West Coast county right in through here, that's where your greatest risk is. Central Florida would be right in through here, these general counties. And then East Coast Florida is going to be where you're going to have the lowest risk for all these threats, the East Coastal counties, like so. Now let's change the script once again before we get ready to conclude the live stream. We got to go ahead and nudge that like button. We have a lot of folks watching right now. We haven't even hit triple digits on the likes. I would genuinely appreciate nudging that like button, getting this information out, especially since I'm not sure anyone else is going to be doing a early morning update before the rest of the day unfolds. So I would sincerely appreciate hitting the like button. Don't have to donate. Don't have to do anything else. Just take a quick second to click the like button. Let's get this info out to everybody in Florida, trying to break it down to the best of my ability in the short period of time that I have. We're going to very quickly transition before we end the live stream. There goes that first system. If you look, the European model does develop it in the Bay of Campeche, a weak little tropical storm that traverses through Belize, the Yucatan, and then just like Tropical Storm Alberto, Tropical Storm Chris, we could possibly have an area of low pressure somewhere. Let me change the color so you guys can see a little bit better of a contrast. We could have an area of tropical low pressure in the western Gulf of Mexico as we get into next week, the 12th of August, into the Hurricane Charlie anniversary of August 13th, 2004. We could be tracking something that could pose a risk to the southeast United States and especially our Caribbean friends down there as we get in and around the Hurricane Charlie anniversary, because there's this other low pressure center right here that's starting to pick up model support that does develop as it moves into our Lesser Antilles. You can see it right there, a nice little disorganized tropical disturbance, if not a low-end depression, forming up somewhere in the U.S. British Virgin Islands, the Puerto Rico whereabouts. If you switch on over to our ensembles, as a matter of fact, I have them pulled up right here, you can see probabilities for tropical depression formation are on the rise in the central and southern Caribbean, up to about 75% chance. So we have a 3 out of 4 chance, 3/4 chance chance of tropical depression formation to the immediate south of Jamaica and the Cayman Islands, producing a lot of heavy rainfall for our folks in Central America. And then just beyond that, as we go through the 11th, the 12th, and August 13th, that fateful day, a lot of us Floridians remember back in 2004, we have another area that is slowly but surely beginning to exponentially increase its probabilities of development. You can see right here, we've gotten actually up to 45, almost 50% chance of tropical depression formation, and it only continues to stick around as it traverses and moves through the greater Antilles. Some ensembles want to deepen it and strengthen it faster and escape out to sea. That would be the best case scenario for us, but if this hurricane season continues to more or less kind of follow the same tempo that it has been, this area is where I've been watching. This area seems to be the breeding ground for these MDR waves to finally develop. We saw what is now Debby finally show itself around here. We saw Beryl show itself down here, and we're going to continue to see things move through. We're starting to see really good thunderstorm activity off that new area of interest right in this same general area. So it seems like our hot spot for development is right around in through here. We haven't seen anything come off of Africa and immediately form up like Cabo Verde season or long track season we would see in September. Right now, it seems like our area of development has been in through this little grid box that I have drawn for you guys. So I would argue pay a little bit closer attention to these ensembles that want to track up towards the southeast. Best case scenario, this thing does flare up early and can move up and out a la Lee, Nigel, Rena, and Philippe like last year, but it seems like our area of development will be a lot further towards the west, and at that point, even if it, let's go ahead and just kind of do it simple. If it develops here and moves up, obviously, it's not going to hit anybody. If it moves and develops here and moves up, it has a greater chance of hitting a bunch of people. You see what I mean? Just even if you give it the same general track, if you put it here and give it that usual fish storm, hype storm track, nothing. If you move the X down towards the Lesser Antilles and develop it, you're going to hit a lot more people because it's just naturally closer. Even if you give it that same geometric 90-degree going out to sea track, the longitude with where these systems develop is key for everything. It's the key to the kingdom. And it looks like our ensembles are thinking we could have development somewhere in through here. So even if it tries to escape towards the north, somebody along the eastern seaboard will need to watch it. Our greater Antilles and our lesser Antilles are going to need to watch it. And if it goes even further than that, the Bahamas, the southeast, and the mid-Atlantic become an issue. If you look at our ensembles, lots of ensemble agreement. The board is getting very busy, and you can see that split flow here. You can see some develop it later, move it further towards the west. Some develop it much sooner, move it up towards the northwest. So lots to pay attention to. Lots of ensemble spread, but agreement out there in the Gulf of Mexico for that second, or that newly developed or that newly highlighted area of interest. I'll show you the ensembles real quick, and then I'll take some questions, and we will wrap up this live stream. We'll take a look at the European ensembles first, track it through time. There goes Debby flying around the East Coast. Look at all of our ensemble support. That is a lot of ensemble support for the Gulf of Mexico. So Louisiana, Texas, if you're down there vacationing near Cancun, Cozumel, the Yucatan, Belize, you need to be paying attention. Down there near Jamaica and the Cayman Islands, you should be paying attention. I have a lot of viewers down there as well. And then look at these ensembles for that feature out there in the Atlantic, and take a look at that. We're actually seeing even more ensembles starting to flare up as we get towards the back end of August. So something else may be on the furthest of horizons at the very tail end of the loop, but let's take it storm by storm. We have Debby here. We have possible Ernesto, and then we may have Francine. We may have Francine way down the road. Towards the August 13th time frame, we could have something in the Gulf of Mexico right around that Hurricane Charlie anniversary. Thankfully, Florida doesn't look to be taking advantage of the Hurricane Charlie anniversary, but closer to my son's birthday, we might be watching something here in the southeast, if not the mid-Atlantic. And there's a huge spread on the ensembles. Just to give you guys perspective, look at the entire spread here. We have Fish Storm members, and then we have Caribbean members. So there's an enormous swath on that other feature. We have not as big of a swath, still a very big swath on that current AOI 10 for 20, but that's an enormous swath here for that extra system that's coming in. And right now our deterministic models do want to track it more towards the west. So we're going to have to just consistently watch and watch and watch. But that's all I have for you guys. Let's go ahead and take some questions. Let's get some questions answered. Please feel free to drop them in the chat. You don't need to donate for me to notice you. I can promise you that. I would appreciate the donations, the super chats, but you don't need to donate for me to notice your question. Dan Denton, another Francis, it depends. If that high-pressure ridge out there in the Atlantic back builds, once again, like we've seen plenty of times, you look at the control mean sea level pressure here for 0Z, and you can see that for a little while, it looks like that feature, Debby, as it finally gets off the coastline, will open up a path of least resistance for a little bit, but we're still going to have to watch it regardless before that high pressure tries to build back in at the end of the loop. You think any more threats for Florida in the future, Samuel Reed? I would say so, yes. I would definitely think we will have one, if not two more potential areas to monitor for us here in the southeast, particularly the state of Florida. Probably in August, and then if I had to bet, probably in October. October is when we come back to a bit of our more homegrown systems in the Gulf and in the Caribbean, and as La Nina really sets herself up, I can see systems coming up out of the Western Caribbean and moving up towards the north that could play a role for us. Wind speeds in Pinellas County. So wind speeds are probably going to be, especially for Central Florida, are probably going to be anywhere between, I'm pretty sure Pinellas County. Lynn Clapper, give me some geography off of that. Pinellas County, I think that's West Florida, isn't it? That's Western Florida, Pinellas County. Anywhere between 40 to 50 mile an hour winds, especially a little bit stronger in the convective bands around this system. Regina Bridgeland, you're very welcome. Do you think that Pensacola will be safe? Yes. MMA fan 3737, Pensacola is looking in pretty good shape. This is an east and northeast side loaded storm. So if you're off towards the west of the center, if you're not within like 10, 20 miles of the center of circulation on the west side, you're okay. We're probably going to see a bit of increased wrapping around as this system further organizes, but Pensacola, especially given where it's on track to landfall, you're going to be okay. And plus, you'll have offshore flow the entire time, so even coastal flooding won't be as much of an issue. West of Tampa Bay, okay, then yeah, I would definitely say 40, 50 mile an hour wind conditions are very likely for that area. Pinellas is St. Petersburg, okay, perfect. Thank you for that. I had a feeling Pinellas looked very familiar. I was going through Hillsborough a lot, and I know I've seen the sign for Pinellas out there. Liz, I hope not. If we get a strong enough storm through here, it's possible because I know Duke Energy is kind of trash or porqueria for my Hispanic viewers. So I could definitely see us losing power if we get a strong enough storm through here. Lola, Kissimmee's going to be okay. Like I said, interior flood threat, tornado risk. It'll mainly be band by band, thunderstorm by thunderstorm kind of risk. They won't be sustained features. Ocala, Florida will be okay wind-wise. Yeah, it should not move that far to the east to where the winds are really going to ramp up. East Coast Florida threat, like I said earlier with my simple weather math, East Coast Florida is kind of sitting pretty. You're chilling. Just watch what comes in off the coastline, pulling in on the east side of the system. Things that form up are going to be moving in towards the area from off the coast. So watch the beach as these systems come in. I'm actually in Panama City, but I'm leaving for Pensacola today for my girlfriend's sake. Does Panama City look decent? Panama City is going to be a close call. It's going to be a very close call. That is on the immediate west side of where this system is forecast to come in. H.H. Gregable, Tallahassee is where I think ground zero is going to be, in the immediate vicinity of Tallahassee. Power issue for Bradenton, it's possible. If we're looking at potential tropical storm sustained winds, if your infrastructure is not the most amazing, then power could go out. I've seen it happen here. I'm not too familiar with the power grid out there in West Florida. Hopefully it's better than us here in new construction Polk County. But yeah, you just never know. We'll have to watch the bands, watch radar. We'll come back over to the radar right now so I can show you guys the latest. So right now, all of our banding is still moving up the west coast of Florida. And I don't know, guys, what do you think? What do you think I should do? Should I go out and chase this, or should I just provide coverage from inside? I don't know. I'm still very heavily torn. I don't like being on the road for a long time, leaving my family behind. That's kind of what I'm stuck with right now. I don't like, that's my biggest gripe. I want to get in there. I want to full send it and just intercept on foot. But at the same time, it always gives me anxiety leaving my family behind. Right now, it is a tropical storm predicted to become a potential mid-grade Cat 1 on approach. No, they don't need anything strong. This will not be a Michael. I've been seeing some folks kind of making the comparison to Hurricane Michael. This will not be a Michael. It will not be a Michael, okay? I can tell you that very much so. It will not be a Michael. That was the same thing with Beryl. A lot of folks were saying Harvey, and it's like, no, this is not going to be a Harvey. Calm down, guys, okay? But, yeah. Rob Kane, that's a really good question. So we could see an extension of our season. Last year, if you remember, we had stuff trying to form into November, but El Nino just shut it down. In October and November, we typically see things trying to organize very weak systems in the Caribbean and the Gulf of Mexico. So I really do think with La Nina, we could see an extension of our hurricane season. We just may be tracking something around Halloween and potentially as we get ready for the Thanksgiving holiday, Black Friday. So we'll have to wait and see. We'll definitely have to wait and see. Wilmington, North Carolina, we're still a little ways out from there, but Wilmington will probably see a lot of rainfall for sure. Honestly, guys, what my gut is telling me is I should head out west to Tampa, near Clearwater, and chase the funnel cloud waterspout threat, and then come back in. I don't know if I'm going to... I also have final exams. That is just on a silly note. I also have 4 final exams I got to take for my classes before the summer semester ends, and I haven't done them yet. So that's a smaller but educational reason. That's for my meteorology degree. And I have 4 final exams that are due tomorrow. So that's another reason why I'm like, do I have the time to be out there flying all over the west coast of Florida? I want to, but I also want to be home and, with the family and, making sure everything is good to go down here. That's exactly what happened back in January. We were chasing up in the Panhandle, and I know that the tornado risk was going to be elevated for Central Florida. Luckily, it didn't pan out, so I made sure to boogaloo back down to the home base to make sure I was here in case anything snuck up our back door. Nissan Junkie, exactly. It was later in the season. Michael was a storm I wish I could have experienced, because Michael, and this is just, I don't know if we have horror fans, we're getting off topic, but I don't know if we have horror fans in the chat, but Michael was an October storm. It was a Category 5, and it was 2018, and the reason I wish I could have experienced that storm, and I'm not trying to make light of it, I'm not trying to make it sound like it was a good thing, I promise you guys, I understand how much of an impact it had, but this is my inner horror fan coming out. 2018 was when the new Halloween film from John Carpenter and Blumhouse released. So I thought that was very, spooky. It was October, spooky season. Michael and Michael Myers had just hit the big screen once again, and I'm pretty sure Hurricane Michael actually hit mid-October, right around when the new movie released. So I thought I like making silly but weird, comparisons like that. It's just my scary movie fandom inside of me. It could definitely be a Category 2 for sure. It could definitely get up to Category 2. We need to see, however, this center here. Let me draw it in. We would need to see this center become a lot more organized. Right now, this still looks fairly raggedy. We don't have that inner ring of higher radar reflectivities. So right now, we are not looking at a very, very fast intensifying system. We are intensifying, but we are not seeing a very, very quick increase in development. If this radar looked a little bit more impressive, if we saw these higher reflectivities here, the yellows and the oranges wrapping around the center, then that would be very concerning. Then that would mean that this thing is rapidly building up and very quickly. Dan Denton, that is a good point. Well, going back to Hurricane Charlie, Charlie did hit on Friday the 13th, so naturally my inner fanboy was like, oh my gosh, Friday the 13th, instead of Jason, it's Charlie here in the state of Florida on August 13th. So I thought that was pretty funny too, making the comparison. Can you discuss surge timings? Absolutely. Let's go ahead and do that. I don't know if they do not. They don't have anything for surge. Let's go over to the ECMWF, the European model, and let's see if we can pull up surge on here. We cannot. So I wanted to pull up something. Let's go ahead and just use one of our higher resolution models. How about that? Let's use higher resolution models, and we'll take a look step by step for Florida, and we'll look at the winds. We'll just look at the 10-meter winds. So obviously, right about here, right about there is when surge is going to be a potential issue for Tampa, St. Petersburg. So later this afternoon, between 3 to 5 p.m., if not maybe a little bit earlier, is when storm surge is going to become an issue for the West Coast. Because if you look right now, we have all offshore flow. Where we sit right now, all of our winds are coming out of the east and the east-southeast, so surge is not an issue for the West Coast right now. The waters will be trying to rise because of the low pressure here, but the wind is being pushed offshore. So that's a good thing. Right now, surge is not an issue. It's towards the back end of the afternoon, right about there. So right around, I'd say 2 to 3 p.m., and then from there on in is when surge will become an issue for West Coast and Northwest Florida. Because now you look at the wind flow, we are on the back side of the system. We have transitioned to an onshore flow, so that water is going to be pushed up into the Tampa Bay area and the immediate coastline. If you live through this geographic piece of Florida, you're kind of doing okay because you're just cockeyed in terms of the geometry of the coast, so the water is not going to be pushed inland as hard. Then, unfortunately, as you get into the Big Bend, you are geometrically in a position to receive all of that surge. Same thing with down in through here. So it's funny, from here to about there, and then from here down to about there is where surge is probably going to be an issue. And then obviously as this system comes in for landfall, surge is going to be an issue regardless. So middle of the day today is when the things are really going to start to go downhill in terms of storm surge. So I would say from about 2 to 3 p.m. local time and then on through the rest of the night as this system moves up our west coast, that's when conditions are really going to go downhill. Right around sunset and just after dusk is when storm surge and the coastal flooding will become an issue for the Big Bend and the Panhandle. Panama City, you're actually in pretty good condition if this system stays off towards your west. Panama City is here, so you will see mainly offshore flow throughout the entirety of this system. If you track it all the way towards the end of the loop, notice even as this system is strengthening and moving in for its final landfall, you're still seeing offshore flow. Even in Apalachicola, you will still see some surge because of just how the waters react to that lowering pressure, for sure. But thankfully, for anyone to the west of Apalachicola Bay, Tallahassee, right in through here, you're still seeing offshore flow on the west side of the system. It'll be in northerly winds throughout the duration of the impact, so you'll be okay. It does seem like it is outperforming to an extent. I wonder if we're going to start getting intermittent advisories on this feature. Let's see. Let me go back to the hurricane side, because sometimes I've noticed when we have a landfalling system coming in, they'll put random updates. They'll put little update tabs on their discussions. It'll say update around here. We haven't seen an update just yet, but if they're still finding stronger winds in the center, then we could see an increase in our projected forecast on approach for landfall. Berlinda, Kissimmee is going to be okay. Four Corners is going to be okay. Like I said, the sun is up. I actually see it coming out right now of my window, and I'm in Polk County, very close. I'm about like maybe 15, 20 minutes from Kissimmee. Obviously 45 minutes when there's traffic, but we all, we're very familiar with that. Right now on a Sunday morning, I'm about 25 minutes from Kissimmee, and we're mainly just going to have to watch our afternoon thunderstorm threat. If we look at the radar here, you can see a lot of the rainfall and the strongest bands are going to be right along the west coast. We have to see if there's going to be any daytime thunderstorm development coming in out of the southeast. The general steering for these systems for my east and central Floridians will keep the storms coming in like so. They're going to be rotating out of the east and southeast, coming across the peninsula towards the center. So Central Florida, the Four Corners, Sumter, Orange, Polk, Osceola, you will be okay. We just have to watch radar. During the day as the sun comes up, we have a lot of moisture, a lot of instability out there, so we could see some flaring up of our thunderstorms and get a bit of a 1-2 punch from not only the feeder bands, but then our daytime thunderstorms that we're very familiar with here in Florida. Is it safe to go to work overnight? I get off at 8 a.m. in Tallahassee. Absolutely not. Chrissy, you should stay home. Stay home. Definitely stay home, please. I would definitely. I'm not an emergency advisor. I volunteer with emergency services, but I'm not an official source. But I would personally, just as a person, a human being, implore you First of all, working overnight, I've done that. Back in my weather squadron, I was very familiar with 12-hour overnight shifts. They are rough. They say that driving on low sleep is just as bad, if not worse, as driving under the influence of you-know-what. So I would definitely say, especially if we're expecting this thing to be bearing down on that area between 5 and 8 a.m., conditions are going to be rough up there. So I would definitely encourage you to stay home or even just leave a little early, work a half shift. Try to be home around 4 o'clock so you can just barely beat it as it's on approach. If we come back over to the models here, we'll just use the H-Wharf since I have it pulled up. This is 8 o'clock in the morning on this chart. A 983 millibar hurricane right over Tallahassee at 8 o'clock in the morning. Look at the timestamp up there. This is what the forecast is, and that's why I'm concerned that Hurricane Center has it in a little late, because there may be other folks who are not watching this stream like yourself, Chrissy, who are in that area thinking, okay, I have time to maybe go to church or go run some errands, go to brunch for some reason. I don't know. Floridians are funny. We're built different. I don't know, whatever the case may be, but I would definitely encourage, especially as the sun comes up tomorrow morning, you want to just stay inside and just be safe. Kenneth Ebanks, thanks for tuning in from the Cayman Islands. Sunny and beautiful. Well wishes to my family and friends in northern and central Florida. Kenneth, we thank you very much for that. We appreciate it. We're going to be watching your area in the Cayman Islands for this stuff coming in out of the Atlantic. We have an AOY out there with a 10-20% chance, 10% chance over the next 48 hours, 20% chance over the next 7 days. And then we have another AOY that will likely be stamped in the next 7, maybe 10 days. So what's the chances of this affecting parts of central Virginia? Dr. Sleep, that is way out in time. We're looking at maybe seeing some rainfall in Virginia from this feature into next weekend with as slow as this system's going to move. Kevin, it's coming. I'm down in Cape and 50-mile-an-hour gusts and sheets of rain from the bands. Yeah, these rain bands that are coming in are definitely going to produce tropical storm conditions. If you look at the radar here, the composite reflectivity, these areas with stronger bands, look at these little feeder bands of higher reflectivity. This is where your tropical storm conditions will be furthest away from the center. The center is here. Not looking too good on radar right now. It is not well defined. It's very donut-shaped and very raggedy. We don't have that symmetrical, perfect circle that we'd like to see in developing and rapidly organizing tropical cyclones. For Lake County, the tornado risk is going to be fairly neutral across the state. I would say we're at about, like, maybe if I had to give you guys a hypothetical 1 out of 10 chance for tornado risks over Central Florida, I would say we're at about a 2 or 3 out of 10. We have to just watch what these feeder bands and what our daytime thunderstorms do. The unfortunate thing is with the wind flow around our hurricane, the wind flow brought in by our trough and our front coming across there, and the winds out of here, if you look, we have a really good rotational component for spinning in our mid to upper levels. Corey Bethune, Perry, Florida is going to be under the gun for some of the worst weather. I'll tell you that right now. Chrissy, I'm not sure if you heard me, but I would definitely say please stay home. Definitely stay home. I don't know if you accidentally sent the same message or it just lagged through or something, but I would definitely say stay home or work a half shift. North Carolina coast, Travis, good to see you in the chat. North Carolina coast is probably going to be seeing some very heavy rainfall into Wednesday and Thursday. This thing is going to take its sweet time getting across northern Florida into Georgia and then South Carolina. It could possibly take a whole 3 days before it goes from our coast up into South Carolina. So it is going to be moving very slowly, very, very slowly. But all right, guys, it is 8:38 in the morning. I got to figure out exactly what I'm going to do. I have very limited time to head west if I'm going to head west and get this chase going. I will see you guys again very soon. If I do not end up chasing the entire day, I will probably do an evening update sometime around 8 or 9 o'clock to do one last look at this system on approach. By 8 p.m., 9 p.m. tonight, we should be seeing the center go from here to somewhere up here. So hopefully I will see you guys then. and we will talk a little bit more about what the impacts look like, and we will see if maybe we make hurricane status by the 5 o'clock advisory. If we are at 60 miles an hour down here with some recon indications approaching 65, I don't see why we couldn't do an extra 75 miles an hour, or not an extra 75, but an extra 10 miles an hour as this thing moves further up the coast, moving at only about 10 to 13 miles an hour. Here's one last look at the satellite as the sun comes up. Should be able to get a better look at this thing now that the sun is moving across. There we go. So still a very lopsided system. You can see that the west side is exposed. There is naked spin right in through here. So that's your dry air, your wind shear slowing it down. But the east side, the dirty side, is really loading up with these overshooting tops you can see on the immediate east side of where the center is. So it is definitely developing. It is definitely strengthening. We will probably see a hurricane. We will probably see a Cat 1, possible Cat 2 as it moves into the Big Bend area. So definitely, everybody out there, be safe. Stay off the roads if you can. Try to take care of things early on today, and then just don't risk it as we go Monday and even into Tuesday. Monday, Tuesday, as this system's moving slow, don't risk it. Don't risk it. If you're not impact on Monday, the rainfall alone is going to produce potential flooding. You don't want to be out on the roads or moving around if there is flooding in effect. Watch out for those flash flood warnings, okay? We have hurricane and tropical storm warnings in effect up through the Big Bend, down the south and southwest coast, or the west and southwest coast of Florida. The warning means tropical storm, if not hurricane conditions, will be moving in within 24 hours, okay? Watch means there is the potential and a warning will be issued. Warning means that the conditions are coming and you need to be in place for when those warnings go completely valid and they're ready to go. So thank you all very much for watching. If you haven't done so already, please consider clicking that subscribe button, liking this live stream, sharing this information. If you have any additional questions, comments, or concerns, drop them in the comment section down below. I'll make it a point to find a way to reply to you regardless of what I'm into today, and we'll talk to you again very soon. Please be careful. Definitely be careful out there for my West Coast Floridians, Central Floridians, and my Northern Floridians for sure, and even into Georgia, South Carolina over the next couple of days. Definitely be alert for this system as it strengthens and moves up towards your neck of the woods. We will be back very soon for an update, whether it be live on the ground or somewhere here in the Weather Center. Not somewhere in the Weather Center, but here in the Weather Center. We'll be talking to you guys again very soon, I can promise you. Thank you very much once again, and until next time, which next time will probably be very soon, this is Weather Center Nazario.